2020 has been quite a year, and today we're going to take a look back at it and do our 2020 wrap-up. That's what's going on today on...
Maybe
we can make that work. Today, Mrs. FTR and I sat down and we watched our 2019 year wrap up, which also went into some goals that we had for 2020. And we both kind of chuckled because when 2020 was approaching, I mean, none of us could have foreseen what it would be like. So in this video, I wanted to go over what our 2020 goals were, and we'll talk about how we did with them. A few of the goals we shared, the first one being that we wanted to get a breeding sow and start breeding our own pigs. Now, regular viewers know that we did not do this, but I felt like we had a pretty good reason. The breeder that we started working with has been supplying piglets to us at such a great price that it doesn't quite pencil out for us to keep a sow year round. He gives us such good pigs and they're such a good deal that, I mean, there's just really no reason that I can see to get a sow. Do you want to say anything?
One of my 2020 goals was to make a weekly menu. I actually did pretty good at accomplishing this.
Yeah, I would have to say that you did, and it has been nice to not be asked all the time, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want to eat? Because it seems like whenever I get asked that, I just don't have an answer. So this was helpful. Another one of my goals for 2020 was to pour some concrete in the corral by the manger. And again, you guys may know that I didn't get this done. I don't have a good excuse for why this never happened. It just never did.
Another one of my 2020 goals was to breed and sell some of my pygmy goats.
But we modified that goal about midway through the year. The pygmy goats were just constantly getting out, and it was getting to the point where once they would be out for a little while, I would take them and lock them in the cow trailer just to, because once they escape once, then they know how to do it and they keep doing it. Fortunately, our neighbors breed and sell pygmy goats as 4-H projects, so we just gave them to them. My next three goals all had to do with work in the shop and at the ranch. They were to work on my old Jubilee that used to belong to my grandpa, rebuild my flatbed trailer to accommodate round bales, and build the alleyway in the corral where we load the cows. I'm gonna say that I kind of accomplished one of these, which was work on the tractor, because I did do that. Although I really didn't go as far with it as I was kind of originally planning to. So that is one that, again, I'm gonna say this summer we might do a full engine rebuild on that tractor. I'm not quite sure yet. The other two, again, no good reason, they just didn't happen.
My last two goals had to do with improving our operation. Those were to build a hay shed here and to step up our egg production. Now, the egg production, I feel like wasn't quite all my fault because we had a fox that kept killing all of our chickens. So now we're down to only having, I think, 3 hens, and they're pretty old, so they don't even really lay that many eggs anyways.
I know a lot of you guys have probably suffered predator losses with your own birds, and it was, I mean, probably about as bad as it could have been. There were just dead ones sort of littered all over the property and leading off to where we know that there is a fox den. So I think that kind of took the wind out of our sails as far as the egg production thing goes. But it did teach us a lot about predator losses and maybe some things that we need to do differently in the future. I'll take responsibility for the hay shed. That was something that I kind of intended to do, but it just never got done. I don't know. I don't have a good reason. So that is how our 2020 goals went. Pretty terribly.
Like probably most of yours.
As we look back at 2020, I feel like mostly what I remember are the bad things, because really a lot of bad things happened out here that weren't even related to COVID. And that starts with our dogs. So early in 2020, well, let me go back. You guys that have been with the channel for a while may remember that a long time ago that you used to see a chocolate lab in the background. Well, her name was Brownie, and early in 2020, she got a certain type of bone cancer in her shoulder that really didn't have a good outcome any way you looked at it. Basically what happens is their bones kind of start like turning to dust essentially, and they're just in constant pain, and eventually if you try to keep the animal alive, the bones will just break, and it's really not a good life. So we made the decision to put her to sleep before things got too bad for her, and we still really miss her a lot. You may also remember that we had a black lab that you would often see in the background. Her name was Remy, and I had Remy since the time she was a puppy. And unfortunately, she just reached the end of her life as well this year. She was 15 years old, which is really old for a lab, and it is comforting to know that at least she lived a long, happy life, and you know, she got to do a lot of fun stuff because she was a hunting dog. So I took her on a ton of trips, but unfortunately they don't live forever, and it was her time to go. And lastly, the question that I'm still getting asked on almost every single video is Sadie. Now, you guys went with us when we went up to Oregon to pick Sadie up at the beginning of the pandemic. We thought it was a great time to get a pup because we would have a lot more time to spend with her. And unfortunately, her herding instincts got the best of her. And I know a lot of you know this already, but just to hopefully put an end to all the questions, because I know people are asking because they're nice, but honestly, it's a question that I hate answering the most. Sadie got out in the road and she got hit by a car. Mrs. FTR made an attempt to take her to the vet, but her injuries were fatal and there was nothing that could be done. So unfortunately, 2020 was a terrible year for us and pets, and for Maggie's sake, I hope things go much better in 21. During the 2020 breeding season, we had more trouble with our Hereford bull. When he showed up at the ranch, a lot of you pointed out that he was a little bit tender on a foot, and what I don't think I mentioned in that video is that he had just sort of come off of an injury and recovered and was walking good, and I guess when he was here, he must have re-aggravated whatever was going on. After taking him out of our cows and back to his owner, he was looked at by a vet, and it was determined that there was really nothing that could be done for him. So I think he made his way down to the packing house. And I think obviously the worst thing about 2020 was COVID. Now, I don't like talking about it in videos. I don't really like talking about it at all, but when you look back at 2020, it's something that you can't really ignore. There you go. When I think about how many people got put out of work, how many small businesses suffered, and the way that, you know, like the Walmarts and the Amazons almost seem to profit off of this, and all of the small businesses seem to really be hurt by it, it's just really not the direction that I think we want to see our country go. But at the same time, it's like, what choice do you have if those are the only companies that are able to provide us with goods, and we need goods? It's like, what else can you do?
I know that COVID had a huge impact on a lot of people, but really we are so fortunate and lucky that it really didn't impact us as severe as it impacted a lot of people around the world. And we tried to keep that in perspective throughout the year.
With that being said, there were actually some good things about 2020, and we wrote them down. One good thing that happened this year is I got my grandpa's loader tractor back. This is one that I had regretted getting rid of pretty much since the moment that I did, and I was finally lucky enough to get it back. Another thing that was really awesome this year is the channel actually did really well. I'm not sure if there's a relation to that because maybe a lot of people were forced to stay at home, but we gained about, just under 20,000 subscribers in the last year, which is totally amazing. So thank all you guys for subscribing, and you guys that have been here since the beginning, thank you for all of your support. Lastly, I think that if anything good came out of this pandemic, it's that it taught us and hopefully everybody else the importance of being self-sufficient. And what I would really hope the result of all of this is that people start to gravitate back towards the style of getting their food where you get it directly from the producer. If we remember back at the beginning of all this, there were times where you couldn't buy meat in the store. You couldn't find a lot of different supplies at the store that we just take for granted that they should have. I think if we go back to this sort of, farm to fork idea, that you're going to avoid a lot of these problems. Let's move into our goals for 2021.
Our first goal for 2021 is to step up our garden. We did pretty well this year, and I think that we can do even better next year. For Christmas, my mom and my sister actually bought us a canner, so we really want to try to get into preserving a lot of the food that we produce from the garden.
One of the big things on my list is to improve the mineral program for the cows. I have actually something that I haven't told you guys about yet, and I'm not going to tell you now, but it's actually going to be a really good way for me to do this. I also want to look at different ways to help control the flies. I know a lot of you guys have told me about, what are they, tree swallows, I think, that eat flies. So I've been considering putting some of those bird boxes out, and there's a few other things that I want to try as well. And of course, probably one of my never-ending goals is to keep working on the tractors. I haven't decided if I want to do a complete restore on maybe one of them, but I definitely need to get them both up to where they're very functional and reliable, because they're almost there, but they're just not quite. So there's a few more things that need to be done with them. The other never-ending goal is corral improvements. Now I say never-ending, but technically at some point there will be an end when we get all of the wooden fences torn out and steel corrals put in. That is a pretty tall order and a really expensive endeavor. So it's not something that I expect to ever be able to complete in 1 year. But if each year I can just keep making steps towards that goal, I'm hoping within, 5, 10, 20 years, before I die, I'm hoping that I can get it done. Our last goal kind of goes back to our 2020 goal, which was to increase our egg production. Obviously, we had some issues with that this year, but I think what we learned from that, we can use going into next year. And I really have high hopes of making some nice nesting boxes and a really nice area for them where it's easy for us to collect eggs and really comfortable for them, which will encourage them to lay more eggs. I have some good ideas here, and I think this will be the year to implement them.
And maybe even sell them.
Yeah. Last year, we made some goals for Macy as well, and that was to get a better mastery of walking and talking. And out of the three of us, she did far better than her parents did when it came to achieving goals. She is, I think, really good at walking now. She can go up and down steps. She can walk through mud, dirt, grass. We took her to the snow and she was able to walk in that, for the most part. She fell a few times, but, I almost fell a few times too. So
and she loves to talk.
Yeah. She's still at the age where we don't understand everything that she's saying, but she says it with such conviction that in her little mind, she knows exactly what she's saying. For 21, Macy is actually going to turn 2 years old at the end of January. And I think for her second year of life, what is a good goal for her?
She will learn her ABCs. A, B, C. And learn to count to 10.
See, if my goals were like that, I feel like I could accomplish them.
1, 2.
As we move into 2021, I feel like the bar is set pretty low. Like it's hard to imagine that it could really be much worse than 20. But never say never. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys, and we hope we see. It's hard to say it because I'm not saying it normal. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys, and we hope we see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.
Bye. Say bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.